All right. Well, I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here for the beginning. I had something that was only going to work out at this time. So it worked. First thing, May 31st, I am going to host a mass and a meal afterwards for anyone who wants to come. So the mass is going to be at 4. Mass is at 4, and then, yep, it's a Sunday. So it's a Sunday afternoon. And then I'll host a meal afterwards. I'm thinking about making like some chicken taco things. There's a recipe called chicken chili verde that's really good. No, Memorial Day weekend is the weekend before. Because the Monday would be June 1st. So I checked that because I didn't want to do it Memorial Day weekend. Too many people are gone. It's the 31st of May. So at 4 o'clock. So you're welcome to come. You can tell everyone you want. It's meant to be wide open. It's not just a Bible study thing. But this year I celebrate 10 years as a priest. And I thought I should do something a little bit more than usual. Well, thank you. I thought I should do something a little bit more than usual. My actual anniversary is June 4th. But that's in the middle of a week, and it's ordination weekend, that coming weekend, and so there's a big holy hour at the Newman Center on Thursday night, which is the 4th. And I just thought, if I want it to happen, a weekend is better. And I picked an evening mass so that other priests could come if they want to, but also because it just stays away from the regular mass schedule, because trying to change regular mass schedules is not the greatest choice. That is something that we'll have to think about. I am certainly interested in it. I won't be around all of the time, but I'll definitely be around for a lot of it, and so it's very possible. I'd have to map out a little bit of the summer, but if you guys want to invite friends, I'm happy to make it happen. If we meet in the summer, well, actually, after a little bit in May, we'll be able to move out there and be back in a bigger space because the religious education ends, I think, the first or second week in May. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that. But I did want to tell you, I'm hoping that I can, I think Sarah was going to send it out to the morning Bible study people today, and I'm hoping that I can get it in some of the parish announcements, because anyone who comes, it would be fun to have you. And chicken chili verde it's an easy dish to make, because it's basically like just a chicken that you could do. The last time I made it, I did it in a crock pot, and I learned some things. Have you ever tried roasting peppers in your oven? You put olive oil on them, and you put them in on broil, and then they get they char a little bit, but they bubble, and then you pull them out, and then you peel the skin off of them that bubbles out. It's nightmarishly hard, and it's really not worth that much. This time I'm buying cans of green chilies and dumping them in. You don't worry.
I'll take my vinegar with me.
It's the chicken chili verde. It sounds like it's a little bit spicy, but it's really not. It's a very good dish.
What goes with it?
So it's just going to be like tacos.
Just tacos?
Yeah. So I think we'll do corn tortilla tacos, and if we get real adventurous, the other thing that I've always wanted to make is called pollo con crema, and it's chicken with a cream sauce. It's like chicken in a cream sauce, and very often you serve it in tacos that have some rice in them. So you put rice in the bottom, and then you put the chicken with the cream sauce over it. And I had it someone made a huge pot of it for us once, and it was glorious. And I've wanted to try it since then. So if we get adventurous, maybe we'll have to look up pollo con crema. It means chicken with cream.
So where is guinea pig?
Okay, one of the things that terrifies people is most of the meals that I've made for large groups of people, I've never made before in my life. Like the soup that we did for Christmas, that was a huge hit. I had never done that before. That was brand new.
Do we have the recipe?
I sent it out to everyone in more than one spot.
That was on Facebook, or was it on?
It was a Tuscan tomato and sausage soup. I'm trying to remember what we looked for to find it. Sausage and gnocchi. That's what I looked for. Gnocchi. It was the potato dumplings that were in it. So we mixed a giant mound of potatoes with flour and then made them into this gnocchi and then made the soup. It was very good. I would love to have that soup again. But anyway, so you're welcome to come. It should be fun. It'll be summer. We'll have a little bit more time. And like I said, you can invite anyone you want. I don't know if I'll get too many of my family members to come, but maybe. Yeah. So we have to dive back into the Gospel of Matthew. And we have this second miracle with the Roman centurion. So the first one is the cleansing of a leper. And this is on page 62. The first one is the cleansing of a leper. The second one is the Roman centurion. And one of the things that I think is really, really beautiful about this passage in the Gospel of Matthew is how this is set up. So a Roman centurion, what would you expect about a Roman centurion? Romans in Israel, friendly or unfriendly?
Unfriendly and in command.
Usually unfriendly, usually in charge, and, kind of tough. The Jewish people resented Roman occupation. And what is so surprising, the Gospel of Matthew is usually thought of as written to a Hebrew-speaking Christian community. It's a very, very Semitic gospel. It's very, very Jewishly flavored. Jesus prioritizes the Jews all the time, or at least that's what you hear. But then in this chapter of Matthew, chapter 8, we actually have these first two miracle stories, and we have two people that were cast outside of the community completely. So the first one was the leper, who can't be part of the community because of a skin disease. It's a bacterial disease that the leper had. The second miracle is for a Roman centurion. So you would think if you were writing a gospel to the Jews, if you're writing a gospel to the insiders, you don't start with the dude that's cast out, that you kicked out, and the Roman. Like you'd start with the Jew. We're the chosen people, we're the best, God likes us most, so he's gonna do the most for us. And Matthew does. He starts with outsiders. And not only does he start with outsiders, but the outsiders are amazing, because the Roman centurion, the scene sets up so that Jesus can exercise his authority from far. Most of the time in the gospel so far, Jesus has been present when he's done a miracle. Like he goes up to the leper, he touches him, he looks at him, like there's physical touch. Jesus physically goes to a house, he physically goes to a place to do a miracle. And along comes this Roman centurion who asked Jesus to come, I think it's, and heal his slave, heal his servant, something like that. Servant. Yeah, this is where your English translation, you should cross out servant and write slave. It says slave, and they change it on you because it's not popular to say slave. But it uses doulos, which it was slave, in all likelihood. I mean, servant is a possible translation, fair enough. But servant, like with an inability to leave, so we would call it a slave. So, he's asking for his slave. We don't know how. This is the scene that The Chosen bills as the sort of son of Gaius. If you've seen the episode, it's kind of touching how they brought the storyline in together. That's possible. Maybe he was a kind of son from a sexual liaison between the Roman and a slave woman, something like that. It's very possible. But he sends a messenger to Jesus to ask him to come and heal his servant. He sends another messenger to come while Jesus is on his way and talks about being a man subject to authority. And so he's like, you do not even need to enter under my roof, but only say the word and my servant shall be healed. And you notice that those are the same words that we say at Mass. They've actually been changed to be more in line with the scriptural translation again. That it's the version that changed when the Mass got revised in 2011 is much closer to, I think it was 2011, is much closer to the scriptural text. The only words the Mass changes is my servant to my soul. But Jesus stands in amazement at his faith. He stands amazed. That's pretty cool. Like Jesus, he's God, so he knows everything. He doesn't get amazed all that often. He already knows it. He's a little bit less amazed by sunrises than you or I are because he knows what sunrises look like. I mean, like the beauty of heaven, those kind of things. And here we have this centurion who expresses a faith where it's like Jesus doesn't even need to be present. All he needs to do is to say, be healed, and that's it. That's all it requires. And Jesus says, even in Israel, I have not found such faith. Even in Israel, this is not there. Now, these words are words of the Mass, that we say, the words of the centurion at the Mass all the time. Remember, the centurion is a commander. He would be the commander of like 100 men. I don't know what the equivalent of the modern day army would be. I forget. A company? So is it soldiers are organized into platoons? And platoons are organized into companies?
A company is roughly 120, 230
Okay.
to 40.
Okay, then what's smaller than that?
Squad.
A squad. So squad, platoon, company. Yeah. And what you start to realize is that armies actually have a lot more organization than it appears at first. And it was the same thing in the Roman army. So centuries that centurions were in charge of, which were 100 men, were organized into cohorts. And a number of cohorts made a legion. And legions were the basic unit of the Roman army. They were about 6,600 men, usually led by a general. So we say the words of the centurion at Mass all the time. But part of what's happening here is also this beautiful commentary about who Jesus is. Because he is the one who says the words and it happens. He speaks with a kind of authority. And I hope that you've been in Bible study long enough that you would recognize, if you think about who speaks with that kind of authority when he speaks and stuff happens. I could say, rain. No beans. You could say snow or sunshine and no beans. But Jesus says it and it happens. Where is that in the scriptures?
Creation.
Yes. All the way back at the book of Genesis. All the way back at the very beginning, God speaks. He says, let there be light, and there is light. He says, let there be water, and there is water. Now Jesus says, let him be healed, and he's healed. And so sometimes people will say, you'll hear scholars say, you can find atheists, well, Jesus never claimed to be God. Yeah, well, you're an idiot. I mean, I'm usually not that blunt, but there's no way you can read this and not read this as a claim to be God, because his words actually make things happen. And there's a lot of hot air that gets spewed in our world today, and people that talk about things and it doesn't make a lick of difference in one direction or another. You could look at the forum and the debates over NDSU joining the new football conference, and there's a whole bunch of spilled ink and, huffy puffy hot air stuff, and at the end of the day it won't amount to a hill of beans.
That's right.
Jesus speaks and it happens. Jesus speaks and it was. That's something beautiful to reflect on. Like, Jesus can act when he's physically present, yes, and that is a beautiful thing, when he does miracles through touch and when he encounters people more directly. But here, he speaks and it was. And so Matthew is definitely pointing to the order of creation. And if Jesus speaks and it was, then the person in the order of creation that does this is God himself. And so, Jesus doesn't come out and say, like, I am God, bow down and worship me. He doesn't do that. But there's all of these things. Like, this is a huge divine claim. Like, this is important because he's acting in the same way that God does. And the man places himself and his servant under the authority of Christ. He talks about, like, I command soldiers, I command men. I say, go, and they go. And I say, come, and they come. And it's like he's submitting his authority to the authority of Christ. He recognizes himself as one of, you could say, this man's soldiers. One who Jesus can command. And this is such a poignant thing. This is pointed. This is a very strong criticism of Israel, because Jesus says, nowhere in Israel have I found such faith. None of the Jews, the people who were chosen, the people of the covenant, the people who are supposed to be on the right track, they're not like, just say it and it'll happen. I mean, even the woman with the hemorrhage, I don't know if we've encountered her yet. We might not. She might be later in the chapter. But like, even she wants to touch the tassel of his cloak, which again is a beautiful thing. Don't get me wrong. But the faith of this centurion is praised in the scriptures. And I think especially as we enter into Lent, and just our whole lives, like, these are the things in the scripture that I hope you get to sit with. The stuff that moves you. And if this is a miracle that moves you, if this is something that touches your heart, where maybe you marvel at his faith, maybe you don't like his faith, and it's like, no, I want Jesus to come and touch me. Like, I don't want him just to talk. Priests talk all the time, right? It's okay to have reactions in either direction, but that's usually a sign you should come back to it and pray with it, that you should sit with it, because there's something in your heart that is moving there, something that God wants to touch. So, do we have faith like this? I think it's a fantastic question. And I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think it's better to admit, like, no, I don't know if I have that kind of faith. Like, I don't know. Sometimes days don't seem to go very well. Like yesterday, I went and the printer was about a rampaging 2-year-old yesterday morning, and it was upset. It was so upset that the only thing to do was to go use a different printer, because that one was not going to cooperate. It was just, the first page it picked up out of the drawer, it jammed 3 times in a row. And it like started ripping it into pieces. I've never seen a printer do that. This isn't supposed to happen. This isn't a thing. Anyway, rampaging 2-year-old. Like, Jesus say the word, and this printer shall be healed. Like, no, I want you to smite it. Thunderbolts and all. So the point is, like, when things do grab your heart, it's good to sit with them. It's good to return to it. And the amazing nature of this man's faith is something to behold. Sometimes you might feel like you're ready to have that kind of faith. Sometimes when life is hard, you might realize, I don't have that kind of faith. I think, again, it's good to admit that to our Lord. It's good to say, yeah, I'm not always all there. Sometimes I get worried. Sometimes I get afraid. Sometimes, no, Lord, I want to see you act. I want it to be much more direct and dramatic. sometimes you might be like, yeah, I can surrender that way. And I think both of those are beautiful. Like, the point of the Gospels is not where you're at so much. The point of the Gospels is to bring where you are to Jesus, because he's the solution. Like, the point of the Gospels, sometimes we think, well, I have to be holy. Like, no, you just have to come to Jesus. He's the one who fixes you. It's in contact with Christ that we are made whole. It's in contact with Jesus that we experience restoration. And so if Jesus is having contact with, garbage day on Tuesday morning or whenever garbage day is, and life isn't very good, well, fine. As long as it's contact with Jesus, he doesn't mind. And if contact with Jesus is Christmas Day morning and life is good and your heart is full of warm fuzzies, then great. In holiness, in good times and bad times, like this is the heart of the gospel, is that you bring your stuff into like union with Christ. Jesus, he does talk about this comparison with Israel. We kind of touched on this, that Israel should have deep faith and it doesn't. I mean, a few do. We don't want to pick on Israel. I'm not trying to do this to be critical of Israel as a nation, but it's just like the expectation, the way that they go about the world, like the Pharisees, we're so holy, we're waiting for the kingdom of God, look at us. And yet it's the Gentile who's actually manifesting like powerful faith. This is the kind of faith that moves mountains. It was the leper, expressing and rejoicing in the encounter with Christ. And in some cases, we're going to find the Jewish authorities watch it and don't like it. And it's just so backwards from what you'd expect. This is why Jesus will say, like, I went looking for the fruit of the covenant and I didn't find it in you, I found it in them, the people that you throw out. It also speaks of a beautiful part about the coming age where the Gentiles will come to faith. Jesus sees his mission as a mission first to the Jewish people, that the fruit of the covenant has to be offered to them first. Redemption, salvation, accompaniment, discipleship, however you want to put it, has to be offered to the Jews first. That's part of the plan of God. But as a Gentile, it doesn't mean you're left out. It doesn't mean you're like in second place, because all the way here at the gospel, we see that the Gentiles are coming to faith just as much as the Jews. Like, I think it points to the plan of God from the very beginning that the whole world was meant to come into communion with him. The whole world is meant to be part of his family. And sometimes, I know for myself, I've always felt like, man, it would be great to be Jewish, like part of the covenant people. And that's an attitude that's very anti-New Testament, because the New Testament is like, it doesn't matter, Jew or Greek, slave or free, rich or poor. Yeah. Like, all are invited into Christ. Like, it's the same tree, it's the same covenant. And it's not because we're good at this, it's because of the goodness of God. And the Jewish people weren't called because they were good at it either. Like, it's not like, oh, they're better as a people than the rest of the people on earth. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. So there is this beautiful note of how even in the Gospel of Matthew, the Jewish gospel, what you have is Gentiles coming to faith all over the place. I find that to be a great sign of hope. I think that is a beautiful thing. And we see one of the things that I think this says about Jesus is how open his heart is. Sometimes you'll hear these passages where it sounds like he's being really harsh. He meets the Syrophoenician woman and he talks about, like, it is wrong to give the food at the table to the dogs. And, the woman says, like, even the dogs eat from the scraps of the master's table. And it sounds very dismissive of her. Except again, her faith is praised. Except again, it's a non-Israelite who's demonstrating a radical kind of faith that surpasses that of the covenant people. And so what we see is this open heart of Jesus, that anyone who comes to him, he will welcome. And it doesn't mean that people don't need to change, and it doesn't mean they don't need to let go of sin, and it doesn't mean all of these things and get tied in arms like Jesus doesn't judge people. No, absolutely. We're not all on the path toward heaven when we meet him. But he is the path. He is the way. He is the one. And so, yes, the importance is meeting him. And his heart and the door is always going to be open. Now, the open door might be your life needs some work. We need to get into a better spot. Sometimes the open door is one of comfort in the midst of sorrow and pain. But in whatever way, it's an open door. And he has an open heart. So the next one that I think is narrated in this gospel also has a great demonstration of what I would call the unwritten gospel, or the things that happen and they're in there, you just forget they're in there. Because Jesus goes to heal Simon's mother-in-law. Sometimes people will kind of critique this tongue-in-cheek as a party foul, like he healed the mother-in-law and that caused problems for Simon and his marriage. And it could be. But the line that I think is great is it says, after he heals her, he heals many others. And none of those others are narrated. There's a much larger group of people. There's a much larger... Jesus does many more miracles than the ones that are recorded. If you read these lines carefully, it becomes apparent that the ones that are recorded here are for the sake of telling a story about Christ, so that we come to meet him. But there's no claim that this is everything he did. Otherwise, one of my greatest things, someday when I meet another fundamentalist Protestant, I really want to ask them this, all this, the whole life of Jesus, okay. So when you're a missionary, you never sleep, right? Jesus, I think, only falls asleep in the gospel a handful of times. One of them's in a boat when everyone thinks they're dying. So you just don't need to sleep. You're a missionary and you follow Jesus, and then you don't get to sleep anymore. You also don't get to eat breakfast, because he only eats breakfast after the resurrection. And you don't get to eat lunch, because he doesn't do that either. And pretty soon you have to start to wonder, if he's like us in all things but sin, he must have eaten at some point. And far more often than it says. Because otherwise, he'd keel over dead, 100 times over just from walking around in the sunshine where the sun is trying to kill you. Remember, the sun in Israel isn't your friend, and it's not very nice. In the modern world, you have to use buckets of sunscreen, being from this area, because it's a very intense kind of sunlight. So, Jesus, the note in this is that, the compassion of Christ, this open heart of Christ, wasn't just for a few select followers of Jesus. It's not just to people who are physically close to him. It says he healed all. He healed all of them, all of the sick who were brought to him. And I think that's an important thing for us, because sometimes when we're praying for people who are sick, it's easy to feel like God didn't listen because they're not healed. But I think it's good to ask, first of all, what is healing? I would say healing is ultimately being brought into communion with Christ. And we believe, I think we should believe, we're invited to believe that happens every time you pray for it to happen. If you, by healing, you mean restoration of physical things in this world, I think Lazarus would have a bone to pick with you. Because most of us only have to die once, and he had to die twice. Jesus healed him, and he came back from the dead. Lord, once is enough. When you're dead, I have a feeling that you'll want to actually stay dead. Especially if you go, if you're on the road toward heaven. Because it's a whole lot better than this world. Even if this world is pretty good, it's still a whole lot better than this world. And it's Jesus brought him back from the dead, and sorry, you get to do it twice. Healing in this world probably isn't the right thing in many cases. You know, I think we're going to find people that actually end up in heaven because they weren't physically healed. And sometimes our perspective is so narrow that I think we have to be careful. We don't see the whole picture. And I bet if you looked in your life at the things that have happened, there were times where something you were praying for you didn't get. And now from the perspective of years later, you can see that not getting it was actually a really good thing, because if you'd have gotten what you were asking for, it wouldn't have been good for you. And, you know, try to remember that when you're praying for things, because it's easy to feel like, God, you didn't give me what I want. We're not talking. And I do this too as much as anyone. I mean, I don't leave myself out. But if you remember how narrow your perspective is sometimes, I think it can help, because, you know, there's all kinds of things that can happen because of events. I know many times where, like the illness of a child, sometimes the illness and death of a child has brought whole generations of people to faith. You look at some of the saints who inspire us, and some of them live pretty awful lives. And, you know, they had a rough time of it, and they didn't have physical health, and they died, and it didn't necessarily feel like a good death. And now, you know, 500 years later or 1,000 years later, their stories are still being told and inspiring people today. So just be careful with your perspective. I know I need that as much as anyone. Excuse me. One of the things about this that's very funny too is that this was probably inconvenient. This is one of the parts of The Chosen that I don't like very much, and I think they got right far more than they get wrong. Like, the people were storming his house. How many of you would be very happy if you had a crowd of riotous people outside your house, like threatening to break down the door? And let's say, you know, your house guest was one of your children or a famous preacher or someone, and you're like, just give them a little bit of room. They'll be back tomorrow. Those kind of things. I don't know. People were doing this outside the rectory. I'd probably say, go home. Go to bed. I want to sleep. So this is inconvenient for Jesus. Like, he's been at it for a long time. He's been at it all day. He's probably exhausted. They probably won't even give him time to stop and eat. And they keep coming and coming and coming. And it says he heals them all. Think about the kind of integrity that takes and the kind of charity that takes. Some of y'all, I went to the post office a couple days ago, and I'm glad that I left the post office, but I was there for a half hour, and there were about 15 people in line when I came, and a half hour later they had only helped 3 of them. And so I had to leave because I had to get ready for a mess. And I'm like, how do we have a functional country? Like, we can't even mail envelopes with any semblance of speed. And I wasn't terribly unhappy. It was just kind of frustrating. But there were people there where their post office person had been refusing to deliver mail for days after the snowstorm. And they're like,